Welcome to this explainer. As a history professor, I am constantly on the lookout for those rare, defining moments where human nature is just pushed to its absolute limits. Those critical junctures where the fate of an entire civilization literally hangs on a single decision. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating anomalies of the ancient world, the Conquest of Makkah. We're going to examine the deeply emotional interplay of power, revenge, and mercy, and see exactly how this single event completely defied the military expectations of its time. To truly grasp the gravity of this, I want you to imagine, just for a second, stepping into the sandals of a historical leader. Picture entering a city full of people who systematically tried to eliminate you. The very people who drove you out of your home, who harmed your friends, who seized everything you owned. Now imagine you suddenly hold absolute, unchecked power over them. Their lives are entirely in your hands. In that incredibly tense, high-stakes moment, would you choose revenge or would you choose mercy? It's a profound question, and it really sits at the heart of the historical reality we're unpacking today.
Part 1. Context of the conflict. Let's establish our historical baseline.
Back in the early days of Islam, Prophet Muhammad and his followers held virtually no power. In fact, they were a highly marginalized group facing intense structural persecution in the city of Mecca. The historical records detail immense suffering. We're talking torture, severe social and economic boycotts, and constant physical threats. Eventually, things got so completely out of hand that it forced a mass migration to the city of Medina. The early Muslims had to flee, leaving their homes, their wealth, and their livelihoods totally behind just to survive. Years later, a fragile peace treaty was finally struck between the Muslims in Medina and the Meccan leadership. But that crucial treaty was abruptly broken by the Meccans, and as we know from antiquity, a breach of contract like this is the ultimate spark. It's the catalyst that ignites this entire historical conflict. Which brings us to part 2, a shift in power, and the inevitable march on Makkah. 10,000. To put that into perspective, in the context of ancient Arabian warfare, a force of 10,000 united followers marching across the desert was absolutely staggering. Prophet Muhammad was no longer a persecuted outcast fleeing in the dead of night. He was returning at the head of a formidable, highly organized community. The vulnerability of those early days, completely gone. Absolute military supremacy was now squarely in their hands. Meanwhile, inside Makkah, the psychological state was pretty much absolute terror. The approaching force was undeniably strong and united, so the city was completely gripped by a very logical fear. The inhabitants knew exactly what they had done to these people years prior: the torture, the forced exile, the stolen property. By every single rule of ancient warfare, they fully expected this returning army to exact a heavy, bloody, and totally merciless toll. And that leads us to part 3, the unexpected resolution. No battle, no revenge. When we study the conquests of antiquity, whether we're talking about the Romans, the Persians, or the Mongols, a breach treaty followed by the arrival of a massive army almost always equals one thing: bloodshed, revenge, and brutal retaliation. The city would typically be sacked, right? That was the expected historical outcome. But the actual event defied all logic. There was no major battle, there was no widespread revenge. Instead, the historical record shows complete forgiveness and a general amnesty granted to the population. Guys, this is a stunning, almost unbelievable deviation from the historical norm. And we can anchor this incredible event directly with the primary source quote. Standing before the defeated, terrified leaders of Makkah, literally the very people who had once ordered his assassination, Prophet Muhammad declared, "No blame will there be upon you today. You are all free." I really want you to think about the immense historical weight of those words. Let that sink in for a second. In the exact moment where using the sword could have been so easily justified by the political and military norms of the era, the choice was total, unconditional amnesty. It's a moment of radical forgiveness in a situation where catastrophic revenge was just the absolute expectation. Finally, part 4, the verdict of history, a victory of character. So, when we as historians look at this incredible anomaly, what does it actually teach us? What can we extrapolate about leadership, authority, and human nature from this one event? Well, it teaches us that true strength wasn't demonstrated by the swinging of the sword, but by the remarkable restraint of it. The conquest of Makkah wasn't just some tactical military triumph or a simple political reorganization. It was a profound victory of character. It proved definitively that mercy and forgiveness can be much stronger tools for building lasting peace than retaliation ever could be. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Where else in history does mercy outlast conquest?
It's a really provocative question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. When leaders have the absolute power to destroy, what is their long-term legacy when they actively choose to forgive instead? I hope this analysis has given you a fresh lens through which to view historical power dynamics. Thanks for joining me, and keep questioning the history you think you know.